yeah, you just had to be there.
You know, you had to be there.
And it was just great to say, like, all right, was there for that. You know what I mean?
You had to be there.
I wish I wasn't there.
You had to be there.
Hi, welcome back. Thursday morning's Off the Ball breakfast with Ger and myself. Very, very delighted to have this special episode of You Had to Be There with the one and only John Meyler. John, good morning.
Morning.
How are you?
Frustrated with Dublin traffic this morning, but other than that, I'm fine. It's unbelievable buses, and was my taxi man going in the right direction, so I was a bit jumpy this morning, so I haven't calmed down yet.
You got here nicely on time anyway. You got the train up for this?
First time ever. I'm old age pensioner, so $2.50 on the train, so I'd recommend it to everybody. Just get on the train and you're here in 2.5 hours.
Look, people are fairly familiar with this slot at this stage. We've been doing it now for a few years, but we'll take a trip down memory lane with you. And you have 5 brilliant entries involving yourself and David as well.
Yeah.
And we might talk about as well a bit of the background, but first, I suppose we should mention probably something that's going to trump everything else in importance is the hurling fundraiser for Tim O'Brien.
Yeah, well, Tim O'Brien, we're doing a fundraiser for Tim O'Brien, John Meyler's Legends versus Anthony Daly's All-Stars on Saturday the 25th of October. But just a small bit of history about Tim. Tim was a fantastic minor hurler with Kerry, with Kilmy and with Causeway Comprehensive. In 2009, we won the minor county championship in Kerry, Kilmy. And Tim also won an All-Ireland vocational medal with Causeway Comprehensive. Unfortunately, he was involved in a car accident and then was paralysed in 2010. And his mum and dad looked after him, but sadly they passed away 3 years ago. And they cared for Tim, really looked after Tim and done everything for him. But sadly, they passed away, and Tim was kind of moved from centre to centre and care home to care home. And, you know, that his sister Emily and her husband David then started to look after Tim and you know, to help him because he paralysed from the neck down.
Yeah.
So at the moment he's in Galway, in the care centre in Galway. But Emily and David are building a house in Churchill, just west of Tralee. They're building a house for Tim. So this fundraiser is for Tim to try and raise a few bob, to raise a few euro for Tim, you know, to really have a home where he can have some life, some peace, some independence, some hope for the future. I was involved with Kilmy for the last 25 years. Anthony Daly was there in 08-09. He won county championships. So, you know, a committee was put together to try and, you know, raise funds that day. So we're hoping to have as many, you know, Cork, Tipperary, Limerick, Clare players as possible for a Saturday afternoon, really, of celebration, really, of Tim coming home. He's actually coming home on the 20th of October. So that's really to raise money because, you know, if he needs special equipment. Yeah. So all of that equipment, etc., is expensive, and you know, voice activation technology things, and so it's a really good cause, and you know, we've had approximately 20,000 raised so far, but you know, every penny counts, really.
It's been unbelievably tough from, like you say, with his parents. Am I right in saying I heard you talk about his friend John Paul, who was in the building site?
John Paul was on that minor team in 2009 as well, and John Paul fell off a building site in Los Angeles, and he died last year, like so. And you know, John Paul always visited Tim when he came home. He rang Tim every week, you know. So you've a double tragedy there, really. And you know, those fellas that won the minor county hurling in 2009 with Kilmy, Daniel Collins, Dougie Fitzell, all those, they all went on to win county championships with Kilmy, 4 of them in the intervening years. And you know, if Tim would have played in those county finals, there's absolutely no doubt about that, because he was a cocky young fella. He was a good hurler, you know, a small bit brazen and things like that, but he didn't get the opportunity to win county championships that Collins and Dougie Fitzell had, and that's a sad part of it, really. And then, you know, John Paul was really, really good to him. And for him to, you know, die in Los Angeles was tough, was hard on Tim as well.
I know you're personally really fond of Tim away from the tragic circumstances, because you talk about him, the cockiness that he had as a player. that you took him off at half time in a game.
I took him off at half time. We played Éire Óg just west of Ballincollig and Ovens in Cork, and we played Éire Óg in a challenge match, and Tim wasn't the best now, and maybe the bus up or whatever, but he wasn't the best in the first half, and I took him off at half time. He gave me an unmerciful bollocking at half time, and and then game was over, and he came back to me and he said, Meyler, he said, look, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that at all, I apologise for my, I won't do it again. And I said, no, Tim, you're fine. But look, a lovely young fella, and it's just sad, and there are a lot of sad cases really in terms of people trying to raise money, and the GAA is a fantastic organisation for coming together to help people. No matter where you're from, if you're from Carlow or from Donegal, people donate, and it's great to see people donating from different clubs and all over Ireland, and that it touches a nerve really that we can help. We all have our limbs. We're able to get about. Tim is not able to get. Tim is in a wheelchair, so. That's the whole idea. The whole idea of the match is to bring Tim home. Give him some life of peace, of hope, of happiness, of independence, really.
It's the 25th of October, Saturday the 25th of October, the hurling fundraiser for Tim O'Brien. We might do a shout out to just before we wrap later on. But come here, some extensive career for yourself on the pitch and in the sidelines. What is it about management that you like?
It's just being involved. That's really it. I love being involved. I love coaching. I love managing. I'm at it since go way back. I was asked to train the Bars under 16 hurling team about 1984, I think. And all I had to do was just turn up for coaching and just turn up for the matches. Jim McCarthy, Lord of Mercy, he was in charge of the team and the Bars at the time. And Jim said to me, John, will you coach the team or train the team? And I said, yeah, no problem. But I said, I'm not doing anything else. So I just turned up at 6 o'clock, done an hour and a half session, and that was it. And, hurley, slitters, water, first aid, buses, everything. Jim Mack looked after all of that. And that's really how I got involved. And if you go back as well, I went to school in Gormanstown, which is just outside Balbriggan. Mm-hmm. And 1969, and Joe Lennon was my first coach, my first real coach manager. Joe was captain of Down that won the Senior Football Ireland in 1968, and he was a superb coach, and he kind of sowed the seeds inside of me then,
Can you go back there? Well, why were you going to school in Gormanstown?
Because my mother thought I was a small bit wild, and I was better off in the boarding school. Right. And my brother had gone to St. Peter's College in Wexford.
Are you from Wexford town?
I'm from Wexford, yeah.
Right.
But Mum, Lord of Mercy, and she said, I think you need to go to boarding school. You need to get away from here and calm down a small bit. So I went to Gormstown School, and I met Joe Lennon in 1969, as I said, and he was the first real coach that I had, at that level. Won an All-Ireland medal in 68 at wing back with Down, and he was the PE teacher in Gormstown. And Joe was, he was way ahead of his time in terms of writing books on coaching, and he was working with RTE in the studio as well and all of that. And I was just blessed with him, and
I actually remember a piece of analysis that Joe Lennon did on Sports Stadium on a Saturday morning, as it was, and it was analysing how James McCartan used to grab the jersey of his opponents and pull them down.
Oh, laddie, pull him, give him a few belts. And he said to me, he said, Matter, he said, give him a wee box, he says, and see how he reacts. Polish jersey, give him the elbow in the stomach, and see how he. And he used to coach those things. He said, Sir, we call him Sir. He wanted to be known as Sir, and yes, sir. And that's what, and we had some incredible footballers. Ogie Moran was in college with us, Paul McGettigan played with Donegal and McGalway, John Gallagher.
This is all secondary school?
Yeah, that's secondary school.
And was your mum right? Were you a bit wild? Did you need a period of cooling down?
Yeah, I needed that, and I got that. I got that in Gormanstown. I got a few belts as well. Father Pat gave me a few slaps of the stick on the hand and things like that. So, but it didn't do me any harm. But it was fantastic. And that was the introduction, really, going back in those days then to coaching. And Mr. Lennon, sir.
Did they hurl in Gormastown as well?
We were B hurling.
Right.
Father Bob Doyle and Father Declan Timmins, they were the two hurling priests, but we were B. We beat Callan CBS in the senior final in 1974, and then we got into the All-Ireland, into the A semi-final against St. Kieran's College in Newbridge, 8-13 to 1-1. So that we won the All-Ireland Colleges football in 1973 and lost it in 74. But our introduction to senior hurling was a fair beating by St. Kieran's in Newbridge. I remember it well because I was, it was 13 aside in those days and there was 2 in the full back line.
Right.
So it was hard going and,
conceded.
But that was my first real introduction to coaching.
Played soccer as well. Scored a hat-trick in the Collingwood Cup final. UCC?
Yeah, but I went to UCC in 74, but if you go back to those days, like there were only 7 universities at the time, and you could play hurling, football and soccer. And my second introduction to coaching then was Kieran Dowd in UCC. And Kieran was a fantastic soccer coach, and he came through Northern Ireland coaching and all of that. And he was a superb coach. And Dow took over then, and I remember then, in 1974, my first introduction to sport in UCC was we were out, myself and John Costello, who was on the Gormastown team as well with me, and we said we go for training out in the farm out in UCC, and we came across these fellas, and they were running around, there were about 20 of them, and we said, can we fall in? And this guy says, yeah, and he introduced himself afterwards, Ger Canning, who went on to become RTE commentator. So myself and Canning have a relationship over the years. But Dowd took over then, he took over the soccer, and we had a very good soccer team in UCC at the time, and he took over the Gaelic football as well. Mm-hmm. So, there was only a few matches in, the Fitzgibbon and the Sigerson was over the weekends then. That was it, and the soccer was over 4 days in the Collingwood Cup. Yeah. And we beat Galway, or we beat Trinity in the 77 Collingwood Cup final up in Galway. So got a hat-trick, left leg, right leg and head.
Perfect.
Perfect. That's gospel truth. Gospel truth. That's the proper hat-trick. No messing no about.
Well, you were right-footed, right?
Right-footed, yeah. But I actually,
You could use your left.
I could use my left.
Arthur's pointing out here the ban had only ended in 1971. So was that something you were conscious of growing up? No,
I was never conscious of the ban. Like we played, where I'm from originally in Wexford. My brother, Lord Mercer, he died a few years back, but he started to come to Albion in Wexford League. Wexford Soccer League was really, really strong in the 70s. They were really, really strong. Narrick Rangers and those teams in Wexford Town were really, really strong. Rosslare had a couple of teams, and I played there, and that's how I started really there.
So it's primary school in Wexford, secondary school in Gormastown, college in Cork. Yeah, and you're a Corkonian,
but sure,
Cork man.
I'm in Cork. No, I'm not a Cork man. No, I'm a Wexford man. The people in Cork would never admit that you're from Cork, and don't ever think. Bishop Buckley came to me one day. I was talking to him, and he said there are 2 types of people in Cork: those that are Cork people and those that think they're Cork people. And I've never pretended to be from Cork.
Was that some kind of coded message to you?
Don't ever think that you're a Cork man. My son and my daughter, David and Sarah, are Cork people, and they support Cork. And my wife is Cork from Blackrock, and she supports Cork with a passion.
So do you. You support Cork with a passion.
I do, because I'm there 51 years, and I'm absorbed into the culture and the culture of Cork. And you've seen that over the summer, and Colin is aware of that as well. That red jersey, that colour, that culture of winning, of success.
Why did you join the Bars?
Because of my wife. I used to socialise in the Vineyard pub and Con's American Bar, the Rob Roy, and when I met my wife in college in 78, we used to go out, and we went out with Christy Ryan and John Cremin. Christy died few years back as well. Tremendous hurler and footballer. But myself, Christy and Kremen used to go out, socialise in the vineyard, and with 3 girls who now happens, with Stella, who now happens to be my wife. She stayed with me for all those years. And Christy and Kremen said to me, "Sir, why don't you join the bars?" And I said, sure, why not? And they brought me out. And to cut a long story short, I had been staying in a flat, in an apartment in college in UCC, and John O'Brien, who was the chairman of the Bars Football Club, was also my landlord. And then he used to bring me to matches. I remember him bringing me down to the park one evening. UCC were playing the Bars in football, and he actually brought me down
to watch, not to talk out.
No, to play for UCC.
Right.
So everyone was saying to me, "Why not play for the Bars?" So off I went anyway, and I had been playing football with Wexford at the time.
I was going to ask you, so you were already playing senior?
Yeah, I was playing senior football for Wexford. I wasn't playing senior hurling for Wexford at the time. And I went out to the Bars really as a footballer. And then I remember one night, I was probably there about a month or whatever, and Con Roach and Charlie McCarthy were there, and they said, football training was over and the hurlers were starting. And Roachy said to me, he said, we hear you play hurling. I said, yeah, sure, I played with UCC and I played minor and under 21 with Wexford. So why don't you join up and train away with us? And I said, sure, why not? So that evening, there was training and there was a small bit of blood spilt.
By who?
By myself and Kieran O'Driscoll.
On each other?
On each other. There was words exchanged. There was separations called for. So there was a lot of blood spilt, and Roachy was delighted with me.
Right, that was that goes one or two ways. And don't bring him back or get him in.
No, look, we've become friends. Myself and Roachy and Charlie and Gerald Mack as well. Like, we've become friends for years. But they saw something then, and away I went.
One of our colleagues is Eamon Fitzpatrick, a good bars man who would have been a kid at that stage, but his uncle is obviously the legendary Eamon Fitz.
Right.
So I know a little bit about this bars team, but when you start talking about who is at training and who's playing on these teams, it's a who's who of Cork hurling, all the way up to JBM, obviously. So what's that like when you're walking in as someone who hasn't come through?
I was blessed, really. I was playing junior hurling with Our Ladies Island in Wexford in we'll say April, May of 1980. And then I joined the Bars. And then I went into a dressing room. And
tell us who's in it, will you, for people who are unfamiliar with the history
Jimmy
of this.
Barry Murphy, Ger Cunningham, John Hodgins, Donal O'Grady, John Allen, Christy Ryan. And then you were managed by Con Roach, Gerald McCarthy, Charlie McCarthy, Charlie Cullinan, Seamus Looney, Lord of Mercy, who died recently. And then in the background then, you had Tony O'Shaughnessy, who was cornerback for Cork in the 56 All-Ireland, Donny Kremen. All of those people way back in the 50s. Jimmy Grady, Donal O'Grady's father. So you had an unbelievable, backroom team and unbelievable players. Like, Cork were after winning 3 in a row, 76, 77, 78. Jimmy was critical to that. JBM was critical to that. And I walk into a dressing room, sitting down alongside JBM, togging off. Like, it's like going and sitting down alongside Ronaldo or Messi.
He's actually at his peak at this page in terms of fame, because he breaks on like as an All-Ireland winning footballer as a kid.
Yeah, 73,
Sidelocks, sideburns, and then becomes this kind of totemic leader of what was on the verge of being one of the greatest Cork teams of all time. And they're kind of in the sweet spot of it.
Yeah. But he's revered in Cork. Like, all you have to do is mention JBM and who JBM is, and he's a legend. And even watching him in the last week, Sunday he was on the sideline for the Bars senior footballers against Clonakilty or against Castlehaven in Clonakilty in the football. Monday night he's on the sideline for the Bars minor hurling team, you know, along with Kevin Murray, won an All-Ireland medal with Cork, you know, so to go into that dressing room of all stars really, like Cunningham was an all-star goalie, Donal O'Grady, you know what I mean, full back, and went on to manage Cork. John Allen.
I didn't realise that they had actually come through together at the club and played the whole way through, and then obviously go on and win All Irelands as the manager and assistant manager, and then. Yeah.
So you
a lot of people who know a lot about hurling.
You had a fierce experience. Fitzer, you mentioned Eamon Fitzpatrick. He died last year. Like, Fitzer was unbelievable corner forward. It's tough, hard. You know, again had played a bit with Cork. You know, but look, I was blessed to go into that dressing room. And then if you go across the road, then I was in with the footballers. Mm-hmm. And then you had like you know, Mick Slocum, Brendan Searles, John Allen was a superb footballer. Christy Ryan, as I just mentioned, Dave Barry was in there. So look, it was unbelievable, really. Like,
what was the dressing room like? Was it supportive, challenging? Was it a mix of all of it? Like, was it intimidating going in?
No, it was a calm dressing room. It was an absolutely calm dressing room, because, and Roche used to say this to me like that he said the harder training is, the easier matches.
Yeah.
And the training used to be brutal.
How was it brutal? Because of the pure quality?
Training was so competitive. It was so hard. And we pushed each other on, and we lived in each other's pockets. Like, you know, myself and Cremin and Christy Ryan, Tomas Marr from Waterford. Like, we were Tim Finn, Cunningham, we were all together. We were all living in each other's pockets in a way. And training was so difficult, and training was so hard, and we were pushed to our limits. You know, in the late 70s, early 80s then, and, you know, right through the 80s. And we were successful winning, you know, senior hurling, senior football, county championships in Cork. And the emphasis there was on really, you know, training and how competitive it was. And they really put us to the pin of our collar, and you know, and then in match days, then Seamus Looney was the doctor. Looney had played with Cork in '72 All Ireland, I think, and Looney was a motivator, unbelievable motivator, and I didn't know at the time, but he had a warm-up routine, and I would liken it to the haka in a way, that you had this doctor, and he was common to both the hurling dressing room and the football dressing room, and Looney was an incredible character, witty, and he'd do the warm-up, right? You'd slap your hands, and you know what I mean, and you'd do that, and you'd do your stomach, and you'd do your thighs. I know fellas nowadays would probably laugh at our warm-up, but like, oh Christ, this was, and I kind of said, you know, moved on then. I hadn't really been aware of the All Blacks then in the 80s as much as I am now. But then as soon as I started to get involved, or, you know, get interested in the All Blacks, then I saw this warm-up where they start, and you know, and then they go like that, and you know, so there's taps on the shoulder, and then there's on the chest, and on the stomachs, and on the thighs, and on the shins, and back up again.
And did you ever find out, had he been down in New Zealand and seen this? Or
but Looney was very intelligent. Like, I know he studied medicine in UCC, but he was very intelligent. Very, very intelligent, and, you know, a supreme motivator, you know.
Can I just make one point about this, right? So I'm looking here at the Roll of Honours, All-Ireland Senior Club Hurling Championship. So All-Ireland Club champions 75 and 78, and then the footballers won the All-Ireland Club in 80, 81 and 87. It's an incredible period for...
There was probably 20 years there of unbelievable success. Unbelievable success. But you had... You know, it wasn't just about the players. As I said earlier, it was about the backroom team. Even the ladies' committee were absolutely superb. So that when we were training for county championships, you'd finish training and you would have a 4-course dinner.
Jeez.
You'd have soup and you'd beef and you'd apple tart and cream and a cup of tea, and then go into the bar and you'll get 2 slips for a pint or whatever. You know, and the ladies' committee were incredible then, and they loved their job. And then, you know, before county finals and that, they got their flowers and their box of chocolates and lads, be out tonight again now, win now today and be out again tonight now for the dinner, and we look after you. And like it was just unbelievable. And I always keep saying I was blessed to be in that environment.
Yeah.
You know, when you're in a successful environment, you have to enjoy it, you have to embrace it, and that's
and welcomed in as somebody who hadn't come up through their system.
I was still told I was an outsider.
Right. To this day.
Yeah, but you always need a bit of dirty blood. I always say that. You know, I don't have blue blood in me, right? I'm not pure bars, right? But they always said, and the true blues fellas would say, we need a bit of blood from outside to come in, and just to mix it up a small bit.
Did they call it dirty blood, or did you call it that?
I call it dirty blood. You know, you need that. You look at successful
Otherwise the gene pool is too shallow.
You look at successful teams like Shea Fahey and Larry Tompkins came in with Cork.
Oh, we know, yeah. I'm
Cork
from Kildare.
won 2 All-Irelands. You know, like it's no mystery really.
This is your first entry, but what we've just been discussing last few minutes. This is John and Bears 1980. So at this point, Cork life is making it very easy for you and your decision to set up shop here, set up shop there.
Yeah.
But I presume you never had that plan when you went down for college that this is going to be me now.
No,
for the next half century.
I got lost. You know, when you come out of college, and I had a chemistry degree, and Jesus, at the end, and why did I do this degree in chemistry? Like I really, and thank God I didn't really get any jobs in the chemical industry. You know, I was delighted, and I didn't really know where I was going, what I was doing, and I was just messing around. Then, you know, the bars just straightened me out all of a sudden, and it gave me a pathway, and everything suddenly becomes better. Like, you know what I mean? And sometimes you need a bit of a curve in the road to straighten you out.
Because you're so connected with Cork, you know, when people hear the name John Meyler. Because there's loads of examples of that connection that's there that we'll see throughout this list. But like, how aware are you of keeping touch with your original roots in Wexford? Like, how prominent is that?
I've lost my touch. Mum and Dad died. My brother died. My sister's in Limerick. My brother's wife is still in Tecumseh with the pub and with the restaurant and with the business. I don't go down enough. I've lost affiliation with Our Ladies Island, that, you know, the junior hurling and football club that I played with. Eddie Maloney from Ladies Island rings me every week. Well, are you coming down? You know, I've just lost that, and because I've got so zoomed into, you know, at that time I got so zoomed into the bars, and then, you know, I got involved with Cork teams, and you just absorb within the culture then itself, and that was it really, you know.
Well, you're made feel wholly welcome, so your situation at the bars, that's where you meet Stella. And then our next choice here, if we go to our second one, when it's playing for Cork, winning an All-Ireland in 1986 against Galway.
Yeah, look, it's I suppose it's everybody's dream to win an All-Ireland and to win an All-Ireland medal. And, you know, I was brought up in at home, and we had a pub at home, and Dad had this big frame up on the wall of the pub, the 55 and 56 All-Irelands that Wexford won.
Yeah.
And this was my introduction to, in a sense, of winning All-Irelands, of what it meant. Like, and you see the iconic photographs of Christy Ring, of the records, you know, Jim English with the cup, you know. So that was ingrained in my head since I was a child. And I looked at that photograph, you know, the 2 big sheets of newspaper of the 55 and 56 All-Irelands, and I knew every one of those hurlers. I knew every one of those. And Ned Wheeler used to call to our house with oil for tilly lamps, and people would come in buy a gallon of oil, whatever. And you know, Wheeler used to bring me out to the garden, and he'd play hurling with me for half an hour, and the mother would make him a cup of tea and sandwiches, corned beef sandwiches and things like that. And he'd call every month or whatever. And that was my introduction to that I could become this iconic 6'3" wheeler. And I looked at that photograph, and you look at Nicky Rackard, the blood pouring down off the side of his face, and holding the hurley with the right hand. And I can still see that photograph, and I could name the Cork hurling team. Mick Cashman was in goal, Tony Shaughnessy, who was cornerback, who later went on to who was in the bars at the time. You had Jimmy Brown, you had Christy Ring, you had all of those guys, and I knew all of them. And then to go meet them then in the 80s when I was playing, that suddenly these guys that are up on the wall in the pub at home are real people that I'm now meeting in Cork in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to become someone like Wheeler, like the Rackards, and I wanted to win an All-Ireland medal. Now, a lot of people say to me, I won an All-Ireland medal pulling splinters out of my arse on the sideline, but I was a sub. I got no run in the semi-final or the final, but I still have it in my back pocket.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
So I...
Well, you did play your part that year. Did you score a point in the Munster semi-final that year?
Yeah, against Limerick. Yeah. No, that was 83. No. I look. And it's up for debate at the moment with Hoggy, with Patrick retiring in the last few weeks, and about how do you measure greatness? How do you measure success? And you look at Hoggy's success over 18 years of playing hurling with Cork. And unfortunately, he doesn't have an All-Ireland medal. Yeah. And I'm sitting on my arse on the sideline, pulling out splinters, and I have an All-Ireland medal, well, in my back pocket. So...
I was going through it last night, right? The highlights of that final.
Yeah.
And afterwards, John Clifford speaking to the team, and this is the one time we will ask you to have the headphones on for this clip here, right? Yeah. So I was trying to find you in the background if you were there. But really, the reason we're worth playing this clip is just how effusive and delighted John Clifford is. This is we're playing here.
Johnny,
you've been in the wars.
That's right. It's only a small price to pay, Joe, for the All-Ireland final. It was a sweet victory. Yeah. I'm delighted. The first minute of the game to the last minute.
What a terrific success, John. You must be very pleased.
Marvellous, Jerry. You can see it here. I think it's fair to say, Jerry, I told everybody during the week we would win. And that wasn't overconfidence. I had complete faith in them. When you have 15 good hurlers and substitutes, you're going to win, Joe. Marvellous. Thrilled with myself.
What's he like?
Johnny Clifford was an outstanding coach. Glen Rovers man through and through. Outstanding coach. And really, really good. And he had a really good backroom team. Then Noel Collins was doing the training, doing the coaching and that. Really, really top-class people. And, when I say you go back to the bars, you go back to the older people, they had a history of success in the 50s and the 60s. Mm-hmm. As much, and you've Clifford there now, and coaching, imparting his knowledge, and it was different hurling then than what it is now. Pull on the ball on the ground and keep it going. You know what I mean? But Johnny was a tremendous man, really good, and Pat McDonald was with him and that. So look, they were fantastic people, really great coaches. And Collins was probably the first. Noel Collins and Kevin Cahill were probably the first two trainers. They came out of Loughborough College in London, and they were both working in Cork RTC at the time, mm-hmm. and they were the first kind of PE trainers in a way that really got their hands into. They really got their hands into training inter-county team, with the strength and the conditioning, the running and all of that.
I just want to point out for people watching, they should go back and watch, because there's a full-time interview coming off the pitch with Tony Keady being interviewed, and he's asked, where did it go wrong? The forwards. It's like,
no, where it went wrong was the Galway Mayor was organising the homecoming for Monday night, and he said the homecoming will be on Monday night, and this was told to us in down the park in the week before the All-Ireland final. The Galway Mayor is planning a homecoming on Monday night. And if you go back and look at Tom Cashman's speech he actually mentions thank you very much to the Lord Mayor of God. So look at that, like, and that was our motivation. Part of our motivation,
Kevin Hennessy scored 2-1 that day. That's one of the great goals from distance. One of those ones.
Yeah.
John Commons as well, the Galway goalkeeper, scoring one of their goals. It was some game watching it back. The highlights.
No, brilliant. And look, Hennessy was an outstanding corner forward for Cork. 6'3", 6'4", not in great health at the moment, but you know what I mean. He was a superb hurler. And played with Middleton and that, and tough, hard himself and Ger Fitz. In there in the full forward line, and Jimmy and Tony O'Sullivan, like again,
Tomas Mull,
you know what I mean, really, really good players.
Yeah. What's your memory like
of
key events in your life? Like when we played that clip there, does it bring you back to that moment where you were in the dressing room like that?
Yeah,
like, would you have vivid details?
It's not like the interviews nowadays. Like they're inside in the dressing room. Ger Canning is interviewing Johnny Clifford there, and you're looking at fellas in the background.
Kieran Kingston was in the background.
Yeah, but the one person I saw was Hennessy there, like, and he's not in great health at the moment, and you're looking at people in their prime. At the best of their ability and the best performance and all that, and now we're all gone older, we're all in our 60s now, and you see how they are now, and you know what I mean, but like they were great days. Great hurlers, absolutely. Like,
well, on that theme, so we're transitioning now to your post-playing career and your list. Does nothing beat playing?
Yeah, I've been out in the bars in the last few weeks there watching hurling training, watching football training, and I was there with Donald Murray the other night. I said, Murray, do you think we could still handle it now? Do you think we could still play now with these fellas, like? And because Ronan Curran is always telling me, nah, you couldn't handle the speed, you couldn't handle the... And I said, no, Curran, you're totally wrong there, because you'll be on the back of your arse. I said, we'd have you on the ground. And like, there's that debate, like, would we be able to, you know what I mean, play with these fellas today, the speed of Tony Kelly and all these fellas and Hoggy and those, like, I think we would. And Murray Donald Murray, in fairness to him, backed me up, and he said, yeah, John, we would. There's no, we would.
I think there's no doubt about it. You just would have been trained slightly differently, and that's how it works.
Yeah.
Hurling can literally have every body size and shape. You can play in different roles.
Yeah.
There's room for everybody.
Yeah.
What's the outlet now? Golf.
Golf every day. I joined Cove Golf Club last year, and I'm playing golf nearly every day. Absolutely loving it. And I played 10 holes with David yesterday afternoon, and enjoyed it. Now, he clipped me. We were playing the 7th, and I put a ball into 10 feet, and he said, good shot, Dad, good shot. And the next minute he puts a ball into 4 feet. So the two of us birdie it. We're playing the 10th, which is the island hole in Cove. I hit an iron into about 12 feet. And he was off the green, and we were walking down to the green and said, I have you now, and I have a birdie putt and you have a chip. And what does he do? Chips it into the hole.
He's not good at golf as well, is he? That'd be sickening.
He's off 3 or 4. He's good, but he's able to beat me. I don't like. I find it hard to,
You still have that competitiveness.
Yeah, because Grandad, when David was small, we got a pool table put into the garage, because as you know well from Rochestown Rise, there was about 5 of David's age and 5 guys 2 years older, and it was always, the World Cup was on the green all the time, and it was 5 aside out there, and then they'd come in if they were beaten or they won or whatever, they'd come in for orange, or they'd come in whatever was there they'd have. And I said, what are we going to do for the winter? So I got a pool table put in, and I used to whip him all the time at the pool. I used to love beating him, and I could beat him, and he'd go into his mother and he'd say, I can't beat him. And Mum would say, keep going. And he'll always refer back to that, that he got. a grounding in the sense of you keep going, you know.
Sorry, pardon, this is a very simple question. Why did you love beating him?
Because I could beat him, but I wanted, in a way, like, he was talented, but, like, you know what I mean, you can't be successful all the time in life, and sometimes there's difficulty. Sometimes, you know what I mean, we hit a wall, and you have to fight, and you have to come back, and you have to go again, and you maybe have to go around that wall rather than go through that wall. And he learned that, you know what I mean? But now I'm learning it at my age now that he's beating me at God. And he loves, like when he chipped into the hole yesterday on the 10th, like I said, Jesus, not again, you know.
I don't know if you appreciate, or I'd be saying it sporadically throughout the years of the show, is the number of kids that we had in that park playing football every single day. And there was loads. It was like a generation through where you'd have loads of good footballers, like Mark Murphy and all those lads. They're brilliant players. Yeah. And so more often than not, the younger side would get beaten. You just improved all the time. Yeah. But I'd be talking to other people throughout the years, John. I just assumed that, like, everyone had something like that growing up. But it's mixed answers. Like,
yeah, well, at the moment, Connor is young fella. Connor, he's three or four doors down from us, and he's the only young fella really there. And he's out there every day, hurling, football, rugby, and I see him with a golf club. Tuesday this week, and he was, you know, hitting a few golf balls in the green, you know.
Yeah.
And Connor's on his own, and then I look back and I often say to Mum, and I said, like, when David was there, like, there was 10 or 12 there, and you know what I mean, they were fighting and everything like that. But it was a fantastic grounding, and you know, I raised that point this week on another topic about rural clubs now at the moment, like.
You're worried about it.
They're struggling in a sense of numbers. They're struggling in that, but like, that was a great grounding for. Yeah, that was a great grounding.
There wasn't anything rural about where we were, but whenever I go home, I go into the parents' bedroom because that's the best.
Yeah, look up
to the green, and there's never ever anyone there. It's just the exact same layout as it was before, because there's still a goal there.
Yeah.
So it's sad in a way because it's changed. Because when it was the best time ever when I was growing up, because there was you were saying there was 10 or 12 kids. It felt like there was about 100 kids out there every day.
And they're still friends, like David, Jamie Drennan, Kellogg's, Gavin Dempsey.
That's the adjoining estate.
It was over the ditch, and they all came there. And then you had, like, Mark Murphy, Christopher Drennan, and you had the guys that were 2 years older.
Yeah.
Was he any good at football?
It's all right.
That'll do.
Yeah.
Didn't do enough. It didn't do enough.
We didn't build up people and that. You know what I mean? We just said, yeah, good.
That's definitely a passing grade.
Yeah.
We transition here to something that you brought up with us the last day. I don't even think it was meant, but it was the fact that you said to us you never get over 2018 when we asked about it, and you put it into your list here.
Look, you never will. Sometimes what you lose, sometimes you'll remember more. You remember the times that you lose rather than the ones that you win, because you can celebrate the ones that you win. What can you do with the ones that you lose? I still find 2018 difficult and hard, challenging. You're 6 points up with 8 minutes to go, and you end up drawing, you end up going to extra time, you know, and it doesn't work out. And then you see, you know, Limerick going on to win 5 All-Irelands, 4 in a row, and good luck to them. I've no problem with that. Yeah. But that was our opportunity in 2018, and sadly we didn't take it. And I was up in Limerick twice this year, and you know, when you go up, you think about it, and that's a fact of life that we all have to embrace. We lose things. You know, and that's it. I'll never forget it. You know, it was tough. It was hard. It was challenging. I haven't even looked at the match again. You know, and that's it. And you know, I had felt this year if Cork had won All-Ireland, and I could take that. I could, you know, pack it up and leave it. You know what I mean? But that was it. But we remember those days, and you know, I look back on county finals I've lost. You know, tough.
Would you ever watch it back?
No. Then, you know, I made mistakes, yeah. You know, you look on those things, then you say, what could I have done differently? Why didn't I do it? You know, as much as Cork this year against Tipperary in the second half, why didn't I change something? Or what could we have done differently? And that's I know I'm old now, but they're still learning in life. You know, you learn an awful lot. You learn more by losing than you do by winning.
Yeah, I hear that all the time too.
You know?
From high achievers. You never watched it back, but how often do you think about it? You've never watched it back, but do you think about it often?
Yeah, when I see Kylie or I see Kyle Hayes or I see somebody else or I see Declan Hannon, and you know, it just reminds me.
Yeah.
It reminds me. It reminds me of everything. You know, when things go wrong in life, and you know, and as I said to you earlier about Tim O'Brien, poor Tim, poor Tim, like paralysed in the waist down, like that's savage for him. You know, and I'm giving out about a hurling match. You know, but when you hit a wall, sometimes you have to go around, and some you lose, you learn more. And that's a reality. That's a fact, and that's a reality. That's a fact, and I have to, you know what I mean. I have to get over it, but I won't.
As a matter of interest,
and when I go up to Limerick, they always say it to me anyway.
What do they say? They remind you well.
Woman came over to me. She says, "John, 2018." She says,
it's nice of her, isn't it?
You know.
Why did you put it into the list?
Because you said to me, I want 5 sporting moments.
Yeah.
And it is a sporting moment. I could put in there winning the Munster Championship in 2018 where we beat Clare. But I thought in 2018 then we had the momentum, we had the bus going. I think we were going there. We you know, there was a momentum there, and we were going to play Limerick in the All-Ireland semi-final. We'd played him down the park, and Gillan was sent off, and I felt, you know, this was our year, this was our time. 6 points up with 8 minutes to go. It's a defining moment. You know, if I was there again, I probably would have brought Conor O'Sullivan on, put him on as a sweeper, shut up shop. But then if you had lost in that situation, then people would give out about you. So look, it's there.
I watched it back last night for the first time in years. I think I watched it once since it happened. I was there. I was in the hill. Some great scores. It was actually a great game if you take it away.
Limerick got 7 points in a row. And Hoggy goes out to the sideline 80 yards and puts the ball over the bar and levels it.
To make it 127 apiece. Yeah.
But Cadigan was coming out with the ball early on. And he was held up by, I'm not sure it was a Kyle or Ger Harrigan, I'm not sure. But the ref gave a free in instead of a free out.
Yeah.
So the small margins. You look at Cork last year with Robbie O'Flynn, you know, small margins, he was going through, whether he would have got a free or not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Johnny Murphy didn't give it to him.
Yeah.
And that was a defining moment last year, you know. So, look, I remember it.
We're about to leave Cork here, but there was nothing close about this year's All-Ireland final at the end. Do you know what I forgot about? That they turned down the homecoming. I only remembered it yesterday. And it's only a few weeks ago, but I'd forgotten that element of it. Do you think they should have had one?
Yes. Yes. And I think that Pat should have insisted on meeting the public, you know, Pat and the players meeting the public on the Monday night in the South Mall, wherever the return was meant to be. Sometimes you have to face your demons. And it would be, you know, one way of exercising, at least starting to get it out of your system. You never will. And I would have had that, and I would have said to the Cork public, Cork hurling supporters, you know, they have been wonderful for Cork this year. Every Cork match was a sellout this year. Every Cork match was a sea of red. You saw those, you know, pitch invasions after nearly every Cork game, where there was a red sea on the middle of the pitch after the Munster Championship, after the league final, all of that. And people in Cork really got behind. They felt this year was their year. And the public that supported Cork over the whole year needed something. And I think Pat should have had the homecoming in the Southmal and said, look, thank you very much for your support. Thank you very much for your help. We've let you down, but we need your support now because we're at rock bottom. We need to go again.
I think it would also have killed the rumours around half time that they're all trying to now, months later, come out and say, no, nothing happened. Whereas actually,
Look, I was back home, I'd say at 10:30, 11 o'clock. I can't remember. I was having a drink with my wife and my phone went up and said, Pat's in Glanmire or whatever. You know, you would have quashed those rumours. You would have quashed that. Look, nothing happened. And let's clear the air.
Yeah.
And, you know, whereas now, you know, the first news conference you guys are going to have with Ben O'Connor is that question. You know, you're going to be talking about last year. You're not going to be talking about 2026. You're going to be talking about the homecoming. You're going to be talking about the second half. You're going to be talking about those things. Those things should have been put to bed. I'm not saying you can put them to bed in 24 hours. You can't.
But you start the process of
But you start the process of healing. You start the process of reflection, of evaluation. And you have to answer those questions. As much as you said to me, Colm, about 2018, you know, I'll never get over it. But I have to heal sometime. I would have healed probably this year if Cork had won the All-Ireland. Because if I felt I might have had some little bit of input into that over the years. And you have to address issues. You have to, you know, stand up sometimes. Look, Micheál Martin was in last night. He probably got an unmerciful bollocking last night over Jim Gavin and losing, you know, the president's place on the ballot vote. You know what I mean? He had to face it. He had to step up in front of the TDs and say, look, I got it wrong. I shouldn't have done this. I should have put Billy Kelleher in instead, and we would have had a presidential candidate in there, Fianna Fáil man. That's what I should have done. I'm sorry, I got it wrong. And then Jim O'Callaghan kind of backed off in a small bit and gave him a bit of space. But Micheál addressed that issue and say, right, let's go on again now.
Wales in Cardiff, Germany home and away. Hull's promotion to the Premier League 2014 FA Cup final, Hull against Arsenal. We're talking about the man made in Rochester Sunrise, David.
Yeah, look, I have two children. Sarah, my daughter, and David. And Sarah gives out to me sometimes it's all about David or whatever, but Sarah was a fantastic swimmer.
Yeah.
Swam for Ireland, all that. Really, really good. And, you know, she says, you know, often gives out to me sometimes you're on about David all the time, but, you know, Sarah won a junior B football medal in Wexford.
Oh, no
yeah, and I was down there for it. Absolutely proud of her that she had played football. Swimming was different because Mum always took Sarah swimming and that. But you know, I've travelled the length and breadth of, I wouldn't say the world, Europe with David, with the soccer.
Yeah.
And he's given us fantastic entertainment, fantastic enjoyment, you know, in all of those things. As a child, I remember watching the FA Cup final. You know, Tom Byrne was down the road. He was the first person in the village to have a television. I remember watching the 65 Cup final, Leeds and Liverpool, and on BBC. My mother didn't like those foreign channels. She said they were dirty. And don't be watching anything else now. But I remember that, and that was my first introduction to the FA Cup final.
Yeah.
And then suddenly to have David playing for Hull against Arsenal in 2014.
Amazing.
I kind of said, Jesus, you know, it's unreal.
It's like 10 years before I was on the green.
You know,
Unbelievable.
It was unreal, and
a mad game. They're 2-0 up after 10 minutes against Arsenal, who were like overwhelming favourites.
2-0 up, and I think just Carzola then got a free kick after about 35 minutes, and you know they were flying, and then they went to extra time. So like Wenger brought on 3 international, Ramsey and 2 other fellas.
Ramsey does the damage. Yeah.
Ramsey done the damage, and you know, and it was an incredible journey. And you know, it was only afterwards then I realised he scored in the quarter-final against Sunderland. He scored in the semi-final against Sheffield United. And it was only afterwards I realised, it never dawned on me, I said, shit, you should have scored. You should have scored in the cup final, and you'd be the only one in history to score quarter-final.
All right.
And I, like, you know, but I would have always said to you about the team first being, you know what I mean, being more important than the individual. But it was a fantastic occasion in, you know what I mean, in Wembley.
That was a great, it's a really good side from Hull. So David was in midfield with Tom Huddleston and Jake Livermore.
And Jake, yeah. But I always say Huddleston was the Rolls Royce.
Oh, what a player!
Was the Rolls Royce, and the two boys were I wouldn't call them Ferraris. I call them, you know, they were the workhorses. Up and down, up and down, up and down. And Tom made the thing. Tom, you know, everything went through Tom. And he was unbelievable. He'd see things before David was even thinking about them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in fairness to Bruce, like the three of them complemented each other. Livermore's dad was a character. Was from London. Cars, sold cars. And he had a long, you know, those long trench coats like, hey, John, how you doing, mate? Hey, diving, and Jake in midfield, that's what we want, John. Yeah. And Tom did it. Get the orchestra going, John. Yeah. And like they were. I met Tom's mother. Then was a lovely woman. You meet him after all the matches.
Yeah.
They're fantastic characters, like it. But Tom was a Rolls Royce. Like you knew he played for England. He played with Spurs.
Yeah.
And Bruce had signed the two of them after they got promoted in 2013. Bruce signed Jake and Huddleston. I said to David, Jesus, I said, if he's signing two England internationals, I said, you better get the finger out, and you're under pressure here, like, and don't worry that, like, and no fairness to Bruce, he put the three of them together, you know. I used to love the, you know, Livermore's old fella was a great character, like, and then he'd bring fellas with him, you know, to the matches, like he had West Ham Dave was a character, like, you know what I mean. He brought West Ham Dave to the matches, and he'd introduced me to all these characters, like, and I joined so West Ham Dave. He's don't mind him, you know. He's West Ham, John. That's all right. Yeah, I know it was good. But there was fierce enjoyment, and like to get to the cup final, something that I had watched in '65 when I was a 9-year-old, and now David was playing there, and. It was just the wrong result, you know.
Oh, that didn't go over the heads of anyone back in Cork. It's an incredible achievement.
Yeah.
It was not a culmination, but like it wasn't out of the blue either, you know. I mean, this was so. Yeah. Was it Dave was signed by Roy Keane in 2008? Was it for Sunderland?
2008 for Sunderland. Yeah. And I remember going over and we're trying to agree a contract, and Margaret, I can't think of her second now. She put the contract up on the table, and I had to look at it, and I said. Margaret, could you give us a few minutes there? And so she gave us a few minutes. She came back in, and I said, spoke to David for a minute, and we'll get a few bob more here. Don't worry, no, I'll get it for you. You know what I mean? And then she came back in the room. Well, everything all right? Are you going to sign? Yeah, but I said throw another 500 onto that there. And she turned to me. She says, John, get David to sign that. That was it. You know. So. They were very good. Niall Quinn was there at the time, and Quinn was very good to David. Margaret was very good as well. Look, that was superb.
Yeah.
Superb.
Did you develop a relationship with Roy Keane through David?
No, I never introduced myself to the managers.
Yeah.
Never. I said, you know, the only place I went to watch David training in Sunderland and Hull. In Sunderland, I had to go up into the trees behind the goal to hide. But when I got to Hull, then the training ground, I'd hide behind the trees. And 1 or 2 days that I was there, I was hiding behind the tree watching training, and the ball came over and I kicked it back. And next minute, this man comes over to me, and it was Bruce here. Mr. Meyler, I don't good. Nice to meet you. Dave's good lad. You know, no, I always try to stay away and not interfere.
Yeah.
And you know, it would have always been clear between myself and David that I don't talk to managers. I don't talk to, you know, don't get involved. Which it was David's business, not mine. But Steve Roos was a fantastic person, and Roy as well. And you know, David was blessed like with Martin O'Neill as well. So you know, he great managers in that time. You know what I mean?
And did he never have an agent, or at the start anyway?
No.
Right.
He had an agent later on.
Right. Yeah. Fair enough. You kind of knew him at that
but
point.
like, look, that I always said to him, I said, look after the green grass, you, and I look after what's outside the green grass. And I said, if you're not performing on the green grass, you don't need an agent, you know.
But it's someone to, like you were there minding him, so that was it. That was the bit where he can actually have the safety, the psychological safety to go on the green grass and know that somebody has my back.
Yeah. No, but it was hugely important. But I wasn't trying to live my life through David. I was there to try and support him as much as I am now in his job in Cork City. If he wants advice or he doesn't want advice, then fine. Or to tell him the things he doesn't want to hear. But I tried to help him. But I insisted on him, you must perform in the green grass. And I remember once or twice he wasn't involved and he was the sub and whatever. And I said, did you talk to Bruce? He said, no. I said, why not? I said, what's the point in talking to Bruce? He's going to tell me. Did you score today, Dave?
Yeah.
Or did you do this? Did you want me to show something where I went wrong? He says, there's no point talking to the manager. Yeah, fine.
Did you agree with that?
Yeah, well, I could, you know, I have players come to me and say, John, I'm not in the team. I said, yeah. No, I would actually go tell them or go talk to them, now I'm leaving you out.
Yeah.
And say, why are you leaving me out? I'll tell you why. No, I'll give you, I won't give you the true story. I'll give you some of it, but not all of it. But if you want to go bear with me, I'll go bear with you. And, you know, and good managers are honest, I think, and straight up and tell people why it's positive, why it's negative or whatever.
How did David contend with retiring at 29? I don't think I've ever actually asked him in the few times I've seen him since. Was he comfortable?
You'd get the odd phone call at 3 or 4 in the morning. This is not great, whatever. And I used to get those phone calls and I'd get up and I'd sit on the top of the stairs and I'd talk away to him for 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever it was. And, you know, it's tough. He was in the prime of his life in a way at 29. But he was on the FIFA game.
He's streaming.
He was streaming. And that, in a sense, was a release. That, in a sense, was a way of releasing that energy, releasing that negative energy, and, you know, streaming that he was doing 4, 5, 6 hours a day, and was keeping them out of the pubs and keeping them out of betting, keeping them out of gambling, drinking, you know. And it used to drive me bonkers because, you know, at times when I went over to meet him, we'd go for dinner. Yeah, right, whenever you're ready. We'll go at 8 o'clock. This might be 7. At about 9, he'd come, what about dinner? I said, yeah, when you're ready. And it could be 10 o'clock. So, you know, it kind of gave him another outlet, really, to release that negative energy, you know, having to retire so young. Like, if you look at Jordan Henderson at the moment, like, Jordan's playing midfield for England, he's playing midfield for Brentford, and the two of them are together in Sunderland. Yeah. You know, Seamus is still playing with Everton. James McLean is playing with Wrexham. So they're all more or less the same age. But David's the one that lost out. Now, he's lost out in terms of playing. He's not lost out in terms of other things. So it was tough, it was hard, it was difficult, challenging, but I was always there, and Mum was always there. Both of us were always there at the end of the phone, or I'd go over.
I didn't realise it was 3 or 4 in the morning.
Yeah, but, you know, depression sets in, anxiety sets in. You know, Callie was going, his wife then had a miscarriage. You know, so look, you know, these things happen to us all, except we don't talk about them. You know, us men don't talk about them, and we don't bring up those things, you know. we don't bring up those things. We don't discuss them. We don't challenge ourselves. And that's an issue.
To wrap, we'll finish where you still are, Kilmy. Since 2000. I was looking at it last night, went on Google Maps, Roach Sunrise to Kilmy GAA, an hour and 46 minutes.
Yeah.
But that's a regular occurrence for you, no problem.
Yeah, it's no problem. I'm there 25 years. I've enjoyed it. I just went down there on the 4th of June in 2000 and just have a look, see what's happening. Can you help us? Sure, why not? And I just fell in love with the place. There's really, really good hurling people. People have an interest in hurling. They have an interest in hurling, farming. They go to mass on Sundays. Mm-hmm. That's it. And they're absolutely incredible people down there. And it's enjoyable. And, you know, I've got fierce enjoyment out of the hurling there. And it's therapy, really, when you come from Cork down to Kilmy.
Is it?
Yeah, there's a release of energy. I go to Bannistrand for a swim. I go cycling Kerry Head.
So it's North Kerry. That's the kind of hurling part of Kerry.
So it's all the, you know, and the matches there that you play, the matches there that you play in the championship are unbelievably tense because, you know, all of the hurling clubs are side by side, and you know, players are intermarried, and there's relations, cousins with the other clubs, and so it's fierce competitive and. It's enjoyable, and I've always enjoyed it down there. I'm involved with the under 15s, under 16s at the moment. You know, we won the North Kerry Championship last Sunday. You know, and they're great young fellas. Huge problem with numbers.
Yeah, you're big on this at the moment. Like when you were asked about hurling problems, that's the big thing.
It's a huge issue at the moment, in terms of numbers in country clubs. You know that you know, we've 2 under 12s, Kieran Sheehy and Dara Dinkins playing. We've 2 under 12s. It's you have to play them, or else you don't have a team. And it's a huge issue. It's a huge issue playing, facing the GAA. If you look at, Monday night I was at the SARS in Middleton, the minor final in Cork Premier 1, and you know they had 31 players. We probably have 16, 17, 18 players. And that's our subs then are probably under 12. And it's an issue throughout the whole country in terms of rural Ireland, rural GAA clubs struggling to field teams. You look at, you know, as I said, SARS and Middleton, there's huge building going on. You look at Glanmire with SARS, huge number of estates being built. Same in Middleton.
Yes, big population there.
The bars now are getting people filling in more all those areas, you know. So look, it's an issue, it has to be addressed, and it's critical because you cannot afford to let clubs slide off the.
How will it be addressed?
Amalgamations, loans, like SARS had 30 players, Middleton have 30 players. You know, Carrigaline have huge numbers.
Yeah.
You go down the road 5 miles, Shamrocks are junior hurling club down the road. They're struggling for numbers. Carrigaline have huge numbers.
Yeah.
Ballincollig have huge numbers. Like Blarney, you know what I mean? They've come in the last couple of years. You look at Castlemartyr coming. Why? Because there's all buildings going on in those areas. You know? So, like, it has to be looked at, and it's critical. Clubs are struggling now. Clubs are struggling with numbers. Clubs are struggling to put teams out. So there has to be, you know, an analysis of amalgamations of looking at all of those issues.
I'd say you might get asked the question of, why are you going all the way to Kilmy? Why don't you do a job like that in Cork? But obviously you enjoy it. Was there, maybe this is too deep of a question, but do you enjoy the solitude of the car journey, the hour and 3/4?
You're on your own.
Yeah?
You're on your own. You have the phone in the car. But as I said to you, it's therapy. I go for a swim as well. I bring the bike. I go cycling Kerry Head.
It's a beautiful part of the world.
It's beautiful. And I enjoy it. If I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't be there. And like that's kind of taken me full circle then with what we started off with the Tim O'Brien fundraiser.
Yeah.
You know, trying to help because they've helped me. I'm trying to help Tim and Anthony Daly, Shane Brick, trying to do our bit for somebody in the locality, and that's the whole purpose, really.
You've done an hour and some change there, John, so to wrap, do you want to do one more shout out to the Tim O'Brien fundraiser for people who want to get involved?
No, I just say to people, like, look at the Hurling for Tim, the fundraiser.
Yep.
We have the match on the 25th of October.
Yep.
I'd ask people to go to the iDonate link to, give Tim a few bob to try and make his life better. For a bit of peace and quiet, and a bit of peace and quiet and independence, really. And that's all we're looking for.
John Meyler, thoroughly enjoyed that episode of You Had to Be There.